a lot of three wide, which you want to talk about another tight end that's irrelevant in my mind. Zero Cole Kmet.
No,
Cole Kmet
he's
anywhere,
he's no longer the best a man Kmet.
Mayo experience.
Mayo experience. Mayo experience. Mayo experience. Experience.
Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience, presented by Underdog Fantasy. Code Mayo and Underdog Fantasy right now will get you a deposit bonus of up to $250 for a first-time depositor. So go do that now. Football right around the corner. Hall of Fame game coming very soon, or has already happened, depending on when you're watching this. And then we got all the preseason. We got the overs. We got the unders. We got season-long props to talk about, and all of the team previews. Today we're doing the NFC North with Jake Ciely from theathletic.com at AllenKid on X. Sir, nice new digs.
Thank you. Setup was the most important part. And it only just took the longest to get to because of the wonderful internet. But hey, thank you. Yeah, setup and happy to be in a nice place. And yeah, everything's different again. Every time you talk to me now, everything's different.
Well, I like the setup that you got going on. Let's jump into it with the Detroit Lions, the defending division champions. Their win total this year is 10.5, juiced up to minus 135 for the over, so people expect them to be very, very good. They're also the division favorites at plus 135, meaning to bet $100, you would win 135 on the return, in case you don't know how odds end up working. What do you make of the Lions this year? Because the division does seem to be a lot more competitive this time around.
It does, but I still think if you look at their team, it's the most complete. You don't have the quarterback question like the Vikings. Now that Kirk Cousins is gone, you don't have a rookie quarterback in the Bears. Not that anybody thinks the Bears are going to win this division in his first year with Caleb Williams. The defense is better than people realize. You and I talked about that a lot last year with their run defense. And then so really I think the only one in play is the Packers, and another year for Jordan Love, and he doesn't have that downturn like he did in the middle of the season last year. I think the Packers would be the only other team I consider knocking them off. But the Lions are interesting for this fact, and what I'm sure you've seen and talked about already for fantasy purposes, which also ties in to their win total and how good they should be, is where's Jared Goff playing? All but 3 games in a dome. Now, of course, the concerning thing for fantasy, as we'll talk about a whole complete discussion, is 2 of the last 3 games right in a row, both outdoors, both in cold weather, or not one in cold weather, both against strong defenses, one San Francisco. So I think that's why you see some people off the stack in some leagues, just because they're looking forward towards the playoffs. But if you're still telling me only 3 outdoor games for Jared Goff this year, I still like the Lions as the slight favorite to win this division. It just feels like they're going to be even possibly better than last year because they have so many indoor games.
I can see it, and 2 of those outdoor games are going to be at the Packers and at the Bears, so theoretically even splitting with those probably locks you up the division if you continue to play so well at home and indoors.
Yeah, and the Bears one is the more concerning one with the cold weather. That's the December one. But yeah, you're right. The Packers is early November, so not super concerning. I'd rather them flipped for the ease of who you're facing strength-wise, because then you could be like, yeah, they could really pull off that Bears one in November. But you're right. You split those, and they should. I mean, on paper, they should win both against Minnesota, and they should at least split Green Bay and then possibly win both against the Bears. So they should conceivably be like 5-1 in this division.
Well, we know basically what this team is going to be. They bring no changes on the coaching front. Ben Johnson is still the offensive coordinator. Tarzan Dan Campbell still the head coach. They're going to be aggressive on 4th down most of the time, and all of the starters are the starters again. So we can kind of go through. Let's start with the running back core, because Jahmyr Gibbs is being drafted as an elite running back to start the season. In season-long fantasy leagues, outside of best ball is going to be a little bit different, and it's going to skew towards quarterbacks and wide receivers. For season-long fantasy drafts, Jahmyr Gibbs is going as high as 4, as low as 6 running back off the board, right around pick number 12. Do you think that's too high? Because the guys going after him are like Kyron Williams, Travis Etienne, Derrick Henry, Isaiah Pacheco, Josh Jacobs, and above him, your guy, Jonathan Taylor, Bijan Robinson, Saquon Barkley. Although I think that Gibbs is going to be good, I still think there's going to be spots where David Montgomery is just the guy in Detroit, because that's how they seem to do things.
And I completely agree. I think if you're on the lower end of that spectrum, okay. I would say 7 or 8 is more in the wheelhouse of what I feel like, just because, look, I have Joe Mixon and Josh Jacobs in a lot of leagues so far already, just because I think they're undervalued right now. That being said, if you told me straight up, I would still take Gibbs for the higher ceiling. I think that the Jacobs contract would suggest Jacobs should see the kind of workload we saw with the Raiders, but there's not a guarantee that it's not a volume-based situation like White. And what if the volume's not there? They brought in Marshawn Lloyd through the draft. They still have A.J. Dillon. I like Pacheco. Pacheco has a little bit of an injury history and consistency. Joe Mixon, his volume-based, and I actually like him on this team, especially for the rushing touchdown upside, which might be his best yet. But all that being said, I think all those are really nice locked-in RB1s. If you want to tell me, can Gibbs put up a Kamara-like season, who I compared him to Kamara before he was drafted, and I thought he should be on the same tier as Bijan Robinson. Different style, obviously, because I'm comparing him to Kamara. That Kamara-type season has finished as RB1, and that's why I think he's worth that. Now, you mentioned all the names. I would still take all of them in front of him. I would still actually even take Derrick Henry in front of him. But I think around the 8th spot is proper for where he should be running back, so a spit too high.
So through the projections that I'm using at runthesims.com, if you go to runthesims.com right now, you can find the link down in the description, down in the comments section. Just go to the site. There's 2 separate parts of the site. There's the betting, the prop sniper, and the DFS product. Code Mayo will get you 10% off that for the year, plus all the sims. But if you just want to build out projections and be able to customize them to yourself of what you think is going to happen, that's completely free at the site if you just use an email address and make an account. So I would highly recommend that you do that. So the stock ones that are in there right now have Gibbs essentially in the same tier within 10 points of these guys. Jonathan Taylor, Kyron Williams, James Cook, who the projections love, Jahmyr Gibbs, Saquon Barkley, and then there is a bit of a drop-off into Etienne, Derrick Henry, Josh Jacobs, and Pacheco. I guess my thing with Gibbs is I don't mind taking him and being aggressive with him if you do believe, because it does feel like there's going to be a year where this just becomes a Gibbs 80-20 split with David Montgomery, and David Montgomery doesn't pilfer touchdowns near the goal line. Like, you could be backdooring your way into the RB1 season, like you talked about. I just think that's at the very high end of the bell curve. Realistically, you're drafting a top 10 running back, but he could kind of fall anywhere in there based on the week.
And I completely agree. And that's why I would have him as lower top 10. And it's funny, the projections are similar as some of the names. Mine, actually, I have 3 guys within 0.4 points of each other. Pacheco, Mixon, Kyron Williams, and then Gibbs is just 2 points within their range. So basically that tier of those 4. So similar names, not quite as many. Mine don't love James Cook quite as much. But I'm with you. I think the bigger question here is, too, of not just talking running back as it itself, but overall where Gibbs is going. I'm also going to take the wide receivers that are usually on the board instead of Gibbs.
So in terms of season-long fantasy, the players going around Gibbs in terms of wide receiver, you have his teammate Amon-Ra going 8th, A.J. Brown going 9th, and then after him you have Puka, Garrett Wilson, Devontae Adams, Marvin Harrison Jr. Like, those are the wide receivers currently going right around Jahmyr Gibbs in season-long fantasy drafts.
Yeah, and I would take pretty much all of them. I even have Chris Olave in front of him. I'm still on Debo in front of him, so I think that's the bigger thing is like the wide receivers on that tier is just where I'd be taking them and then coming back, because we're talking tiers strategically here, and when you bring up those names and that they're all in the same group, I mean, you're talking about, in my opinion, there's an upcoming drop-off after you get past Adams, Olave. I know a lot of people have London higher than that. You and I already talked when we did the South show. I wouldn't put London there yet. I think it's a little much, just assuming that Kirk Cousins is coming back 100%. I know what Kirk Cousins can do. We've seen it time and again for what he can, especially for his number 1. My drop-off would be Olave to London. And so that in between there is probably where I feel comfortable taking Gibbs. And if it's not Gibbs, I'm still comfortable taking Kyron or Joe Mixon or Pacheco, who we've talked about. And that's why I'd rather take one of those wide receivers, avoid that drop off, and get a running back who I still think is in the same range.
So what do you do with David Montgomery then? I have him projected as running back number 17, so 2 running backs inside the top 20, which is really nice. 10 total touchdowns is the projection, very few catches, but more rushing attempts than Jahmyr Gibbs. He's being drafted as running back number 20, pick number 60. That's in the same range as Ramondre Stevenson, DeAndre Swift, and James Conner and Najee Harris. I guess the thing with Montgomery is, like, week to week, he's probably a flex or a very low-end running back, too, with limited upside, unless you really backdoor into one of those games. However, what does David Montgomery look like if Gibbs gets hurt?
I think he's the clear lead. I think he's potential bell cow if you look down this depth chart. I don't think that all of a sudden he'd be top 5 running back.
He'd be close.
With David Montgomery in the range of why wouldn't he have a workload like Kyron Williams did last year? And we've seen it from David Montgomery before. So I think that's why David Montgomery is a valuable pick. It's funny. My projections are not that far from yours at all. I mean, we're talking, I think it said 172 fantasy points. Mine are 169. Yours has him as RB17. Mine has him as RB27. I have just a bigger cluster of names that slide right in front of them within 5 fantasy points of each other. It's just, for everybody out there, it's funny how like just projections can be that different on an overall ranking, despite the fact we're basically on the same page. So I think, well, let me flip it back to you. I think that David Montgomery versus Brian Robinson is a conversation I've been having with a lot of people.
I would just take David Montgomery.
So would I. And I think that's the thing, is like you're talking about 2 splits where both might have similar value week in and week out as they stand right now. But if anything happened to the other, I would trust Montgomery a hell of a lot more if something happened to Gibbs than I would Brian. I like Brian Robinson, but if Eckler was gone and done for this year, I would take Montgomery over Brian Robinson.
Sure, but I think that you'll mine more value out of David Montgomery week to week because where you're drafting him, he's a guy that you probably have to play. It's not just like, hey, I'm going to put this guy on my bench. If something happens to Gibbs, I'm going to play him. Now, maybe you do luck into that with a great late round pick, and you don't need him as a running back too or a flex option, but just based on a back-end 5th round, early 6th round pick where he's going, he's probably going to end up being in your starting roster. I would trust him week to week in the platoon situation far more than Brian Robinson. And then you're trying to guess who's going to get hurt ahead of them. I would just say I would rather have David Montgomery with how everything stands right now. And I do think that David Montgomery just in that offense is going to be more valuable should anything happen to the starter versus Brian Robinson if anything happened to Austin Eckler. Because you're still dealing with Jaden Daniels probably stealing touchdowns from you too.
Of course. And with David Montgomery, and this might be taking it too far and galaxy braining the whole situation here, but if we're going back to their schedule, and the Bears and the 49ers outdoors, generally the outdoor games, you see a little bit more of Montgomery because of Goff, because of even Gibbs. They kind of lean a little bit more into the run game. Again, could be galaxy braining the entire thing because if they get behind early to the 49ers, David Montgomery is going to fall back behind Jahmyr Gibbs again. But just another argument to be made, like later in the season, you could see a little bit more Montgomery given those games.
Laporta is being drafted as either the 1st or 2nd tight end off the board in conjunction with Travis Kelce. Both their ADPs are like 25, 27. So people are making a choice. If they're going to go with tight end early, they're taking one of those 2. If it was you, who would you take? Because I would take Travis Kelce. Yeah.
We're on the same page. I assume we're not doing the first round, the tight end this year, but
well, there's no need. Yeah, because one of the main reasons to always take Kelce that high was that there was no clear identifiable number 2 to him. Yeah, right. Mark Andrews led everyone in fantasy points one year. Great. Then he didn't come close the next 4 years or whatever it was. But Kelce was always there. So the gap between him and everyone else really lent itself because of that positional value where you're forced to play a tight end. Just Kelce versus the 4th tight end, especially for week-to-week consistency, was just so high that it made him all that more valuable. But now that there is someone else in the conversation, it makes him a little less valuable. Like, I like Sam Laporta a lot, and I have him projected for a lot of fantasy points this year. But it's not significantly more than a lot of the tier behind him is the thing. So I probably won't end up with either of these guys.
That's the bigger thing. It's like, so I would still take Kelsey. Kelsey actually had more fantasy points per game than him last year. People forget that it was actually 2 games that Kelsey didn't play, not just the one where he didn't get the 1,000 yards. So I'm still taking Kelsey. Actually, Laporta was also behind Hawkinson in fantasy points per game. So there's a case to be made that if we knew Hawkinson was healthy from day one, even with that quarterback situation, at least in the same group as Laporta, Andrews, I think Pitts. I just had this conversation with Meany on my podcast yesterday, and I was sitting there like, everybody wants to put London inside the top 10, and I know it's happened 2 years in a row, and you've been burned on Kyle Pitts, and I know we talked about him on that show, but like, if you're going to vault London into the top 10, why aren't you vaulting Kyle Pitts inside the top 5 at tight end? If there's somebody who could unseat Laporta and Kelsey, it's Kyle Pitts, who had over 1,000 yards as a rookie. So all that being said is, it goes back to your point, is I think there's a close enough group where you could throw Trey McBride in that conversation. Maybe Dalton Kincaid, although that news seems to fluctuate by day of how much they're going to use Knox and whether it's going to be 12 step, blah, blah, blah. I just think there's a tighter group than people are giving credit for. I don't think the gap from Laporta at 2 to who I have, McBride at 5 or 6, is big enough to warrant taking him in the 2nd or 3rd round.
I think per
Kelsey either.
I think per projections, yes. I think that there is a discernible gap between that tier. Just in terms of where they're being drafted, I don't see that. Like, do I need to spend a late 2nd round pick, early 3rd round pick on one of these 2 tight ends? If you want to, I don't think it's a bad pick. The problem is you have Kelsey, you have Laporta, then there's a drop off I have of around like 25 points to like 7 guys, where some of them are going as late as like the 8th round. That I think I'd rather get another stud running back, a stud wide receiver, and take my chances on one of McBride, Ferguson, Ingram, Andrews, Njoku, Kincaid, Kyle Pitts, George Kittle. Like, one of those guys is going to be good. I just need to hope I pick the right one.
I have so much George Kittle. Because it was the last name you just said. The only tight end to have 1,000 yards last year. And people want to write him off behind all those names you mentioned, even Ferguson, even David Njoku, who we're both severely out on, and I just don't get it. I am all over taking George Kittle this year. I know the efficiency is off the charts for what he does on a per reception basis, but that's Brock Purdy, that's Kyle Shanahan, that's this offense. Why is that going to change unless he gets hurt? Why is George Kittle going to be anything different than what he was last year? I am so in on George Kittle for that reason alone. Like I said, now, George Kittle, I have projected for 30 fewer points. Actually, 35 fewer, almost 40 fewer than Kelsey. But because he's going as late as he is, I think the answer right now this year is just George Kittle.
For me, it would probably be Jake Ferguson or Evan Ingram based on where they're being drafted, because they're going even later than Kittle. So Kittle being picked at number 63 in season long, Ingram 71, Jake Ferguson 82. Like, Ferguson just seems like the very logical answer to that question.
Yeah. I realized Ferguson was going that late. So, yeah, I think Ferguson's a great call.
He's going higher on underdog because people are stacking up Cowboys. They're going with Dak. They're going with CD early, then Dak. Then they're taking Ferguson or Cooks or all of those guys together. In season long, people aren't going to do like a quad stack of a team just based on how it goes. And, you know, a lot of people who are playing in season long aren't dabbling in best ball. But if you're one of those people, you should. And use code Mayo at underdog. Get in the game. I mean, you might win like $1.5, $2 million, whatever it might be. But those strategies aren't 1v1 filtering over. I think a lot of people just assume like, oh yeah, everyone who plays best ball is going to play in season long. But the inverse is just definitely not true.
Yes, 100%.
So the strategy isn't keep coming that way. So you have Amon-Ra going inside the top 5 receivers. I think he's one of the top 5 receivers. He's probably number 5, number 6, whatever it might be, number 4, whatever. Jamison Williams, I guess, is the interesting one here. People really want to buy back in. He never really gets used, but could he have like a Santana Moss, Deshaun Jackson type of go here?
So funny you said that. So I did my top 5 breakout wide receivers of the Athletic, and Jamison Williams was number 1. And people are like, there's not enough for him to go around, that whole cliche. The thing is, breakout doesn't mean he needs to be a top 20 wide receiver. Just talk about Jamison Williams in his own right for anybody that might not know, and I think most people do, but just in case. Before he tore his ACL in college, he was thought of as a better prospect than Devonta Smith, who was there before him. And now we've seen what Devonta Smith can do. Again, I'm not saying he's going to be Devonta Smith, You brought up the two names. It's funny. I actually said Deshaun Jackson, later career Deshaun Jackson, which all we're asking for is 100 targets, even 90. It doesn't need to be 120 targets. It's not going to be 120 targets if St. Brown and Laporta and that backfield are all healthy. That's just not going to happen. But 90 to 100 targets can get you that Santana Moss, that Deshaun Jackson, Torrey Smith type of season where he gets 60, 65 receptions. And for the player that he is, and Devonta Smith is even 60, 65 receptions, 900 yards, 6, 7, 8 touchdowns because of that ability. All that equates to a wide receiver 3. And with a very inconsistent season, it's going to be frustrating week in, week out, which means just keep him in your lineup. But where he's going and the potential for what he is, and you look down this depth chart, especially with Josh Reynolds being gone, if he's not the number 2 wide receiver, his career is done. If he can't win this, it's kind of the Bo Nix argument when we talked about that. If Bo Nix isn't the starting quarterback week 1, there is some damning news there because you should not have to struggle and not beat out the other options. Jameson Williams should not be the number 2. And if he is, I do think wide receiver 3 is well within play.
It is, but I do think that there's significant downside to that as well. So projection-wise, I have him at wide receiver number 65. Just based on the numbers that I inputted, I would probably manually bump those up, which you can do at runthesims.com if you feel that way. I just think it's such a wide range of outcomes. You're buying on the talent, which is absolutely true. He was the first receiver picked in that draft, wasn't he? He went 8th overall to the Lions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was first, if not worst, at second.
He came in.
Where do you put him in your rankings?
I had him, I didn't make rankings, but I talked it through with Meany.
Okay.
I had him around like 49, 50. So the guys that he's being drafted around right now, and I thought this was the more fun experiment to do, like Ladd McConkey, Christian Watson, Keon Coleman, JSN, Cortland Sutton, Brian Thomas, Jameson Williams, Curtis Samuel, Tyler Lockett, Khalil Shakir, Jacoby Myers, Jerry Jeudy, Romeo Doubs, Mike Williams, Shaheed. Like, that's the right range. But yeah, I would almost want to take a flyer on like Brandon Cooks instead of Jameson Williams, if that makes any sense to you.
And that, it makes sense, but I wouldn't do it. I would take the upside of Jameson Williams because in that range, I'm not really shooting for, like, there's a few names in there that would just not even be on my radar. Like Curtis Samuel. Like, is there a world where he's potentially the best wide receiver for the Bills? Sure, but what would that even still equate? Yeah. Wide receiver 25? Like,
if that.
Yeah, and there is a world, like I said, he's not going to be Devontae Smith. There is a world where that could actually happen. Somebody gets hurt, and I would take somebody getting hurt or missing time or just completely falling off the map. Maybe Laporta just has a huge regression season. I don't know. I'm just saying, Devontae Smith top 20, top 25 season is plausible for the talent and the situation. Like, I'm also including the fact that Jared Goff and this offense and how much Jared Goff is going to pass and how many yards and how many touchdowns. It's in play. A lot of those names, I think it just depends on your draft, which way you want to go. Like, there's some names that are like, I'll take Brian Thomas in some leagues. I'll take Jameson Williams in some leagues. I think that's fair. I'm at 44. I'm shooting for upside in this range. Like, you mentioned Lockett. Fine if I want a fringe wide receiver 2 or 3, but do I want to shoot for more upside? And maybe not. Maybe I have a very risky start on my squad and I need somebody for some kind of stability, but I'm shooting generally for somebody that, like, okay, you say it all the time, Pat. You're like, play out the scenario in your mind, create the narrative. Go down this list, and I would say each wide receiver, what's my narrative for how they get to top 20? And I think a lot of those names you mentioned, Jameson Williams kind of stands out as one of the few that actually has a realistic narrative to get there.
Passion, drive, patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Supercharger, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want. It's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. Everyone who tunes into the Pat Mayo Experience knows from time to time I like to talk to you about some health supplements that I end up taking, and I've been doing Timeline's MitoPure now for about a month. Feel great.
And I think you can too. Take 2 soft gels a day for 2 months, and you can see significant improvements in your cellular energy, your muscle strength, and your endurance. That was the big thing. I've been golfing more this summer and lifting less. Yet when I go back to the gym for my once a week, like max lift, I'm not really atrophying that much. I'm not losing a ton of muscle, which is absolutely fantastic news for me and my golf game, because if you work out too much, then you get too sore, you get too stiff, you need to retain that flexibility. I'm retaining my muscle mass at the same time, although I'm not working out as much. And it comes in 2 product designs to fit your needs. They're berry powder, which is great to mix into your breakfast yogurt or daily smoothie. That's how I've been doing it. I've been eating some strawberries, raspberries, blackberries with a little bit of yogurt, a little bit of protein powder, then boom, Timeline's Mito Pure right on top of that. Or they have soft gels for the days where you're just on the run and wanted something convenient to grab and go. So Timeline is offering 10% off your first order of Mito Pure right now. So go to timeline.com/Mayo to get that 10% off. All right?
Let's move on to the Green Bay Packers. They are the second favorites in the NFC North, coming off their run. They just paid Jordan Love. Everything is looking good. In Cheesehead land, their over-under is 9.5 wins, similarly juiced up just like the Lions to -135 to that -9.5. To win the division, they are +225. So $100 would gain you $225 if the Packers come through. I think that... I don't like saying this because I know that everyone's on the Packers. I just think that they may have played a bit above their heads last year.
Really?
Yeah, I do. What they accomplished last year, I think would have been more logical for them to do this year. But we've seen this happen a bunch of times where the team that they're a year away type thing, but then they get there that year and then everyone is all in on them the next year. And then they can't quite meet expectations of what everyone thinks. 9.5 wins. I'm right around there. I'd probably go 9 and 8. Something like that, because maybe it's because I don't think that Minnesota is as bad as some of the projections say they are. I think this division is going to be competitive. I could be way off base, and Jordan Love could just be an MVP candidate. I do think there is that swing too, where they go 14-3, and they really are what everyone says and improved from last year. But I could just see it being a case of too high of expectations, especially because the Lions are expected to be so good too. How many of these teams are going to be awesome? We do these previews. The easy thing to say is this team that was bad and lost a player is going to suck. This team that was good last year with young players is obviously going to be better. The NFL doesn't work that way. It just doesn't.
I don't disagree with you all at all. Those ones that do the over under for wins and 90% of the league is over, and all of a sudden you add up all the wins, and it's that doesn't math. No, I said really because I kind of feel like last year was about right, because I think they won and did things they shouldn't have, and then they lost and didn't do well on things they should have. And I mean, you just look at Atlanta, a loss early in the season, whatever. But then they had that 4-turn downturn where Jordan Love played like junk. They lost for Detroit, deservedly, at Vegas, at Denver, lost those games. Sure, they're road games. Sure, they're out west. The Minnesota one makes sense. They lost, at Pittsburgh, whatever there, but they beat Detroit in Detroit. They beat Kansas City at home. It's wow. But then they come out and they lose to the Giants and Buccaneers. So I just feel like they kind of went both ways. It's they did really good in some spots that you didn't really expect it, but also the opposite. So that's why that's what my really response was. I actually do think they should be more consistent and better this year. I think part of that does have to do with Jordan Love and the offense. I don't think the defense is amazing, but I think it's enough to keep them in it. And if you gave me that exact same schedule as last year, I would say when they won 9 last year, I would take the over for that schedule. Their schedule this year isn't that much worse, if at all. But to your point, Detroit is going to be tough. I don't really buy in. I'm not with you. I'm a little bit different. I actually think Minnesota is properly valued. I think their defense is just not good, and I don't think Sam Darnold in this offense is going to be very good. So
it's going to be JJ McCarthy. We'll get to the Vikings in a second. It's going to be JJ.
So yeah, that, and I do I brought up. I actually wouldn't be surprised if the Vikings are the worst team in the division and the Bears are better than them. But I do think that the Bears are at least another year away. The Vikings are a year away from trying to get back into the mix. I think this is a 2-horse race. I do like the Packers as the odds versus the Lions just because I do think last year was kind of expected, and I think they could pull off 11-12 wins this year.
Most definitely within the range of outcomes. I'm just trying to defy expectations a little bit here, and just sometimes it doesn't go well for teams. Like, let's talk about the receiving core. You have 4 wide receivers you could plausibly draft here. So I think they're kind of fantasy poison in that way. Like, week after week, it's just going to be someone different. I don't want the headache of drafting any of these receivers, especially at where they're going. Like, if I had to take a shot, it'd probably be on Romeo Doubs.
There you go. Well, so there's 2 parts here. Is you take the cheapest 1 or 2. When we have these kind of situations. And I actually think Wicks, even though he's getting a lot of offseason steam, and deservedly so for his talent, but even so, he's still decent value. The 2 most costly are Reed and Watson. But what I always say at the second part of this is buy the cake, not the icing. Just Jordan Love. Jordan Love's the answer because we're not even talking tight ends yet, and you have 2 guys who might just cannibalize each other anyway.
So this is the problem with Jordan Love. He's being drafted ahead of quarterbacks I just like better for fantasy. So he is going as quarterback number 9, 73 overall. Quarterbacks being drafted after Jordan Love in season-long fantasy. Dak, Purdy, Caleb Williams, and Jaden Daniels. 4 guys I'd rather have than Jordan Love for fantasy.
We're different on this one. I have Jordan Love as 6. I think Jordan Love, even if you include the downturn last year, he was on Dak Prescott's heels, who was 3, 4, 5, depending. There's like little minute differences on some of the sites. Definitively top 5. I have Love right in front of Stroud, Prescott, Murray, Burrow, Daniels, Purdy, down from there. I think that what we saw last year, even with that terrible stretch, that 4, arguably 5 game stretch where it was like just, we kind of sat here, it's like, that's the regression. The touchdowns were not able to continue. This was a mark that we saw back with like Matt Ryan and the Falcons back way in 2018. And we all said it was coming, and then it was really bad. Like, it was awfully bad. And then he bounced back. The thing I like about Love is that even with those numbers, he was on Dak Prescott's heels. And I'm bringing that up because there was a conversation recently. It was Dak versus Love, and I would take Love because I think that when they're that close and Love has a little bit more rushing upside at this point of Dak's career, I think Love is on the upturn, on the upswing. I actually think Dak just came off potentially his career year for us, for fantasy purposes. So that's where I'm going with this. I think Love has more room to improve than CJ Stroud does, who's a pure pocket passer, very much more like Dak Prescott than Jordan Love is. And CJ Stroud needs to throw for 4,700 yards, 35 touchdowns to hit top 5, where people are taking him at 5th, where Jordan Love can do 44 and 30 or so, but because he runs a little bit more, it just offset it with those 3, 4, 5 rushing touchdowns.
I mean, I don't feel like he actually runs all that much.
He doesn't. He's like Patrick Mahomes rushing.
I think Patrick Mahomes rushes more than Jordan Love does.
Not that.
Let's see.
What is he, like 300?
Let's see. Last year, rushing-wise, for Jordan Love, he had 50 carries for 247 yards in 17 games.
And what did Mahomes have? Like 90 more yards, 80 more yards?
Sure, but like I'm not drafting Patrick Mahomes for any sort of like rushing ability until when I want him to rush is in the playoffs is when he's going to rush. That's sort of the MO that we've seen. Once it gets later in the season, the Chiefs actually have to win, then Mahomes starts rushing the ball a little bit more. We see that with a lot of quarterbacks. But I think that Love was rushing a bit more earlier on in the year, and as they got better, he actually stopped rushing as much because he hit his over rushing prop, I think, 8 of the first 8 weeks, and I don't think it hit again the rest of the year.
Yeah, but he had 2 rushing touchdowns later in the year, too. Again, it's not huge numbers, but at least he's getting into the end zone. It's old Dak Prescott, where it's like, okay, you get 250, 300 yards, 4 or 5 touchdowns on the ground. It's minute. I'm not saying count on it every single week. I'm just telling you, like, why. Like, we're kind of in this range. Like, my tier for what we're having this conversation right now, like, I'll just go back to it real quick. So I'm looking at everybody from Love through Kyler is not even 2 fantasy points per game. If you want to debate it that much, I'm not going to like sit here and be like, damn, you're wrong. You're 100% wrong. Jordan Love is definitively QB6 and we're done. We're not even having this conversation. No, I'm making the case of why I give him the slight edge. We're talking about a little bit of tiebreakers here. And honestly, if you're talking about the passing game too, in my opinion, where CJ Stroud was coming off those kind of numbers. I think Jordan Love can hit those numbers, and if he hits those numbers with the touchdowns that he threw for last year, and I think he could get last year's touchdowns and they hold. Like he passes for more yards with this receiving core, and the offset of how efficient he was, the touchdowns kind of hold. I think now he's in that conversation for top 5 or 6. Again, I'm not going to argue that much. It's quarterback. I would just take Love at 6. I don't have a problem with him with being ranked that high.
Dak was 55 for 242, so essentially the exact same season on the ground.
I thought he ran for a few less. But how many times did he get in the end zone?
Twice.
Did it? I thought he was 0.
No, he was twice.
Last year.
2 on the ground.
Yeah. Okay.
So he'll still call his own number from time to time. And listen, they really tried to make Tony Pollard a thing last year, too. And that probably sucked up a lot of carries that I would have thought he would have had.
Oh, it was Mahomes. Sorry.
Mahomes had zero rushing touchdowns. Either way, I think it's close between them. And we kind of agree that the Packers defense should be better. The Cowboys defense should be worse. I just think we're going to see a lot of passing coming through Dallas. And I would kind of hitch my wagon to that. Although I do see what you're saying about Love versus CJ Stroud, that could he have a better year than Stroud? Absolutely. It's just, again, I just think that people are buying so much of these Packers that they're all a bit overvalued. The one who seems like a good value is Josh Jacobs because he's boring.
Josh Jacobs, back to what you said with Dobbs, who, by the way, I have an article over at The Athletic, to NFL trends. So the increase in zone defense is absurd, the jump in the last 5 years. And the other thing I did, Dwayne McFarland did an article, and it went into the stats behind it, but that pre-snap motion leads to a 50% fantasy input or uptick for the wide receivers. So I went further with that. Of all the Packers, like the Packers show up in different spots. Jaden Reed shows up a lot. Christian Watson doesn't at all. Dontavian Wicks shows up a lot. But the person who actually showed up the most in both charts and multiple ways, like I did yards per route run, man versus zone, like tons of stuff. It was Romeo Doubs actually showed up the most. Calling in cheek, whatever it might be, but who was the defender that just faced him the other day? Jerry Alexander. And he was saying the top 2 guys he's ever faced, Devontae Adams, Romeo Doubs. Now it's his teammate, whatever. I'm just saying Dobbs, I think, is a terrific value. I think Wicks is a good value. I think Jacobs is a good value. And as of right now, I do think Love is a value, but I'm with you. Those are bigger values than Jordan Love is.
Yeah, Jacobs and Dobbs, for me, would be the 2 I'd draft. I don't really want anything to do with Kraft or Musgrave. Like, when you have 2 okay tight ends that split time, like, what are we doing here?
I've said that so much this offseason is that the last time that we've had 2 tight end ones on the same team
Patriots
was Gronkowski and Aaron. Yeah, Gronkowski and Aaron Hernandez. That doesn't happen. And that was as anomalous you can get because at that time, Aaron Hernandez and Gronk at times, whoever was running the routes, one of them was basically lining up as wide receiver anyway. We've played this game before. You and I had this argument years past. Not argument like we were on the same page. O.J. Howard and Cameron Brate. Well, that's great that O.J. Howard's a freak of nature in a mismatch, but he blocked so well that he was on the line and Cameron Brate was running routes, and then he did nothing. And we do this every single time. Isaiah Likely is not relevant unless Mark Andrews is hurt. So we go down this road, and I'm with you. I have no Musgrave. I have no Kraft. I don't even have Musgrave inside my top 15 tight ends. He might finish as tight end 13, but that means nothing these days anyways. 550 yards and 5 touchdowns makes you tight end 13.
Yeah, they're DFS plays. They are guys that you might want to target in good matchups, or at least perceived good matchups on underdog for their higher for yards or reception that game based on what you think that they're going to do. I just can't imagine running these guys out if we don't want to take any of the receivers, why do we want to take 2 lesser tight ends?
No, I don't disagree with you at all. That's the big one. I'm very much off on both. I'd rather take a flyer on Gesicki or Tyler Conklin than either of them.
The Bears. Would you believe that the Bears over-under this year is 8.5 wins, and that is been bet up to minus 165, meaning you would have to wager $165 to win 100 on the Bears over 8.5 wins. Their division odds. So this is what I was curious about, because when you said like the expectation for Minnesota, what do you think? So I told you the Lions are plus 135 to win the division. The Packers are plus 225 to win the division. What do you think the Bears odds to win the division are versus the Vikings odds?
Plus 280?
What do you think the Bears odds are?
That's plus 280, plus 300, somewhere around there.
They're plus 275. What do you think the Vikings odds are to win the division?
Plus 400.
10-1.
Wow.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, I think they're better than that.
I mean, I don't think they're that bad. I also don't know if I think the Bears are that good. I get it. You bring in Caleb Williams, which is a massive quarterback upgrade. But, I mean, hell, we've been playing this game with Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence was supposed to be the best since Peyton Manning. And how did that first season? Now, granted, they don't have Urban Meyer at head coach. But, Eberflus, I don't know, he's that much better. I don't know that I'm ready to say that's a team I felt like a lot went right last year. Like I think you asked most people, they would never, within 5 guesses, guess that they won 7 games last year. Never. Like there's no way. Because you look at this team and you're like, man, that was awful. I think their run defense helped a lot. But, I mean, look at the schedule, too. They had the upset. I think that was the biggest thing, is they pulled off the double upset across the bye against Minnesota and Detroit. But, I mean, Arizona and Atlanta at the end of the year, yeah, they should have won. They faced Carolina, should have won. Vegas, should have won. At home, Washington, they won the games that they should conceivably win with a good defense, and they pretty much lost all the rest except for that Minnesota and Detroit back-to-back game.
Their defense vastly improved when Montez Sweat came on. I thought that was a ludicrous idea to trade for him, and I just was wrong. Straight up wrong about that. Like, he made an actual impact to their defense as a whole, which is pretty impressive. But Shane Waldron is now on as their offensive coordinator. He's spent the last 2 years in Seattle as their offensive coordinator. He was the pass game coordinator for the Rams under Sean McVay before that. What sort of offense do you think that we'll see from the Bears this time around?
I think you'll see a little bit of a mix between the two, which means a lot of 3 wide, which you want to talk about another tight end that's irrelevant in my mind. 0 Cole Kmet.
No
Cole Kmet
he's no longer the best a man Kmet.
No, that's a good one. I was about to say I should grab my Thanos glove over here and snap him from existence, because that's about what he matters for me. Look, it just comes down to what this offense stylistically should be, and we've already seen Waldron, and it's kind of the tree that he's in, but I would expect a lot more 3 wide. All that being said, I'm going to jump ahead on you on here. Rome Odunze is not coming close to my roster at that ADP. Did we not learn anything, from Shane Waldron with Jackson Smith-Njigba, and stop this nonsense of the 3rd wide receiver on a team?
I think it just makes Keenan Allen a really good value.
I have a lot of Keenan Allen. This is a good bad thing. Like, we're going to go back in 5 months and be like, Keenan Allen sucks. Jordan Love sucks. Josh Jacobs sucks.
So, my projections have him pretty low. I have him projected as wide receiver number 41, but he's being drafted as wide receiver 30, pick number 70 now. I would take Christian Kirk over him. I would take Chris Godwin over him, who are going later than him at wide receiver. But the thing I was shocked about Rome Odunze is he's going at number 42, pick number 97. That's
absurd.
It's just way too high. Unless he is just amazing, which, DJ Moore's way better. And DJ Moore to sign that huge extension. I like how the smart thing about DJ Moore that they did with that extension, the 4 years, like $109 million, is that it kind of expires when they need to re-up Rome Odunze and Caleb Williams. That was smart GMing.
It is smart GMing. Hey, Jerry Jones, take some notes here. I don't know how many more shoes need to drop for this dude, or coins, or whatever the hell he's talking about. Our projections, again, aren't that far off. I think that Keenan Allen's a great value. The reason Odunze is stupid in my mind, now, this is coming from somebody. I had Odunze in tier 1, 3 guys in tier 1. I love the talent. He was with Neighbors and Harrison, all 3 together. I actually think they deserve to be very close to each other. I don't think Harrison is leaps and bounds in front of the other 2. So I'm making that clear. I love Odunze. That being said, Jackson Smith-Njigba last year, wide receiver 48 at the end of the season. That's 48. Now, if you talk points per game, 64. The 3rd option, Tyler Boyd on the Bengals for how long when both were healthy? Best case scenario, finishes the year as wide receiver 42. Why are we doing this? We just had the example and shown to us last year that unless somebody gets hurt. Now, I get it. If Keenan Allen gets hurt again at this point of his career, you basically have that running back handcuff at wide receiver we've talked about a lot of times. It's the Trey Benson situation.
But it doesn't always work out that way.
No, it doesn't. And that's kind of what I was going to say, too. There's not a guarantee that it's going to hit, too. But I'm saying, I'm trying to make the argument for people, but even so, he should still be in the 50s. Smith-Njigba should clearly be ahead of him. Cortland Sutton should still be in front of him. Calvin Ridley, Marquise Brown. I mean, these names that are kind of down in this range. I don't know the ADP off the top of my head. I'm just, from what I've seen, some of the names going behind them. It just makes no sense, in my opinion.
So here are the guys going after Rome Odunze right now. It's in that same range. He's going around the same as Rashee Rice, DeAndre Hopkins, and Xavier Worthy. Then we have Christian Watson, Ladd McConkey, Keon Coleman, Brian Thomas, Jamison Williams. Like, is a part of that grouping, but he's ahead of all of them.
I would take all but one of those.
Who's the guy you wouldn't? You don't like Keon Coleman, do you?
That's the one.
I love Keon Coleman. I just want to draft that guy because he has good vibes.
He has good vibes. If you told me social media present only, he'd be a top 10 pick. Like, let's be real. Real here.
I actually think. I mean, we haven't done the. I think I'm doing the AFC East with Leone just because Bills, Leone, get him on board.
Yeah.
But I just think he's going to catch an incredible amount of touchdowns this year. I think he's going to be their red zone guy, not Dalton Kincaid, not Dawson Knox.
Oh. So, no, I actually do think Dalton Kincaid will be in play as well, but I was with you on that, your first statement. So when Meany and I were talking to Bills on my podcast, I actually said that Keon Coleman could lead this team in touchdowns. I still think the most valuable and the Stephon Diggs replacement wide receiver is Khalil Shakir. I am super high on Shakir. My concern with Keon Coleman, now, I like Keon Coleman. I was one of the people who was in on him. I wasn't the highest, let's make that clear, but I was higher than the average, if you want to put that in quotes or whatever. But I like Keon Coleman. I just think he's a year away. I don't think he's ready to hit the NFL. Now, could he get 700 yards and 8 touchdowns? Then, of course, and there's a chance that he's actually even potentially a wide receiver 3 in that case. I'm just saying, Keon Coleman, I think, has a potential rough path to getting onto the field where I could see them pulling this 12 set with Knox, with Kincaid, Curtis Samuel, and Khalil Shakir, which honestly, stylistically, I'd rather have Keon Coleman out there than Curtis Samuel. I'm just saying, I think he's got a little bit tougher sled in front of him, especially with Brady's connection to Curtis Samuel in the packs. I think there's that inside path for Samuel to start immediately. All that being said, that's the only one. And it's very minute. If you want to take Keon Coleman because of all the arguments I just made against Rome Odunze, if you want to, because the one thing I will say, you do need an injury for Odunze. Keon Coleman just needs to somehow hit the ground running instead of being a year away, and that would make him his top 2 on his team.
The backfield, DeAndre Swift is there now. Roschon Johnson is still around. Your guy, Khalil Herbert, still kicking around. 22 at running back is the ADP for DeAndre Swift. That's about, 15 places too high at running back. Like, the move here is take Herbert. The move is probably just to not draft any of these guys. But if you're really committed to drafting a Bears running back, draft Roschon and just hope someone gets hurt.
You could do that.
Or draft Herbert.
Like many spots high.
I just don't. It's not that he's not good. Clearly, DeAndre Swift is good, but I think that he has a very particular role. If you think that he's going to be a workhorse, I don't know who has convinced you about that, but if that's something you can be convinced on, I got some reverse mortgages for you. I got some really terrible real estate that you need to have. But what do we think he's getting a 70% share out of the backfield? No chance.
No. But he was RB24 overall and in points per game last year, just having that 1,000 yards. And how many touchdowns did he have? I'm pulling it up. 5. 90% Matt Forte, which is fine.
No, Matt Forte was the number 1 running back in fantasy one year. He had 90 catches.
1 year. I'm talking about the average. Okay, 85%. James Cook. He's James Cook.
James Cook is better. Right? James Cook is in a better offense, and James Cook might actually play 80% of the snaps.
But he's not going to get any of the touchdowns. We've already seen that before.
He may. Earlier on in the season. Later in the season, Josh Allen will just call his own number. Well, he's still pretending like he's not running a lot.
So all I'm saying is I don't think ever been as high as you are on James Cook, of the fact that I think James Cook is probably a mid RB2. I would say Swift is a fringe, maybe even a high-end RB3. We agree he's being drafted too high. We're at least on the same page as that, and I'm with you in the fact that I'll just take it to discount. Honestly, Herbert or Johnson, nobody wants either one of them.
No, DeAndre Swift's just so goddamn good. So, for example...
Look, we agree. Don't draft Swift.
So, DeAndre Swift is going ahead of Zamir White. I don't even like Zamir White. I'd rather take Zamir White.
It's funny you say that, too. I'm with you because people are like, Zamir White is just a pretty good running back. I was like, okay. And we had Rashad White last year who had 3.8 7-something yards per, like, couldn't even get 4 yards per carry, pure volume based. It's going to be a volume based situation. And now we're talking about Dylan Lobby, who just 3 weeks ago possibly might not even make the roster. And now all of a sudden he's playing with the first team and making receptions. Look out, Zamir White. Stop.
Minnesota, as I mentioned, 10-1 to win this division. Listen, I don't think they're going to win the division. I don't think they're going to be like a top 5 picking team towards the end of the draft. They're over, and this is another one. So all the teams in this division have their number juiced up to the over. So their win total is 6.5 wins, which is now juiced up to minus 160. So everyone in the NFC North is going to be amazing, according to people betting on this stuff. I don't necessarily agree. There is 2 guys that I think that you want from this team. You want Justin Jefferson, obviously, and I do think that he's actually the number 1 receiver in football. People can draft CeeDee Lamb, people can draft Tyreek Hill. It's Justin Jefferson. I don't care who his quarterback is. You already mentioned how crappy their defense is. All they're going to be doing is throwing, and they're going to throw to him. He just put up wide receiver 1 numbers with stupid Nick Mullins. Like, it doesn't matter who plays quarterback for them. They're just going to lock into the best receiver in football and throw his way. He's going to come down with the ball. It's just he happened to get hurt last year. Whatever. You hope he doesn't get hurt this year. And then Aaron Jones is probably a pretty good pick for value.
Oh, sorry. Like, all right, I have him still up there on the tier. I wouldn't have him at number 1 only because I think that lowly of Sam Darnold, and we'll get to that in a second. But yeah, when it comes to Aaron, I'm surprised. Like, for the years on end, and you should know this because this is our 10th year, 11th year doing this. I was the I hate Aaron Jones guy. Like, I'm just like, no, I just don't want him to be an RB1. Yeah, the touchdowns got him there 2 out of his however many years. But it's just that Aaron Jones isn't too different actually than James Cook. Like, there's a good comparison. And I think that if you talk about Aaron Jones, yeah, excited to have him as my RB2. Do I want him inside the top 10? Absolutely not. But if you didn't rank him inside your top 10, you hated Aaron Jones. And this is the one year. It's funny, the same thing happened with DJ Moore. This is one year when now it's like all of a sudden I'm the high man on Aaron Jones. Like, why isn't Aaron Jones in the fringe RB1 conversation? Like, that's my question back to you. Like, what's keeping Aaron Jones from being RB12?
I think it's probably age, new system, and maybe people think that Ty Chandler is actually good, which I think he showed that he's not very good last year. It's just he's being drafted like 2 picks before DeAndre Swift. Like, wouldn't you just much rather have Aaron Jones?
Yes. I think that's why I brought up James Cook. I would actually, Aaron Jones, James Cook, I would have the conversation in my mind every single time. And I think Aaron Jones is going to have more touchdowns.
He might. That could end up being true. Now, projections will have him pushed a little bit lower because projections don't hate Ty Chandler. But I think you bring in an Aaron Jones on this sort of contract to say, hey, you're getting 70% of the workload. And even the weeks where he gets 55 or 60 or 65, I just assume he's going to be far more involved in the passing game than Ty Chandler would be. Like, he might be 3rd on this team in receptions because Hawkinson's not going to come back until like week 12 or something.
Well, so for my projections that actually don't like Ty Chandler as much, I have him for 258 touches, 46 of those are receptions, and around 1,250 yards and 9 total touchdowns.
Okay, so
does that sound reasonable?
Yeah, let me do this for you right now. I'm going to go to, I forgot. Myles Gaskin is on this team.
Uh-oh. Look out. The gas can.
What a hero here. So I have Ty Chandler projected at 33% of the market share of rushing attempts. Just bump him down to 20%. Okay. So we bump him down to 20%. We add that extra 13% to Aaron Jones, which is feasible, I think. That gives him 59.
That's more of what I have.
59% of the market share out of the backfield. So we rerun the projections, and all of a sudden Aaron Jones is running back 12 instead of running back 21. Without changing without changing the touchdown share, the reception share, anything else. Just give him a larger share of the carries out of the backfield versus Ty Chandler, and all of a sudden he's fringe RB1.
There you go. And that's exactly what I have. And that's the workload that I'm projecting. Now, this is why Run the Sims and my downloaded projectable, this is why you do this. Like, if you want to go to either one, say we're stupid and change them. Say, no, you're dumb. He's only going to get 45%, whatever it might be. Like, it's just like, this is why we do it. But it's a really good tell here. I legit think, and mine's actually not even 70. It's 65, 66-ish.
Yeah, but you have him 66 of the running back carries. I have him at 59% of the overall carries. That's giving J.J. McCarthy 10%, Darnold 2%.
Oh no, I include the Yeah. Okay. To be clear, yeah, I was saying 66 as only for running backs, but yes, as overall, including the quarterbacks and all that's involved as well. The projections for me actually have them at 12, one spot in front of Rashad White, in front of James Cook, ETN, Zamir, Kamara, and those kind of names. I have them at 12 with those projections.
What do you make of Jordan Addison?
I think he's right now, because everybody's so terrified, he's a good value.
Like, is he a better fantasy player than any of the Packers receivers? Like, without knowing, like, would you draft Jaden Reed over Jordan Addison?
Yes.
You would?
Yeah.
Okay. Because I think they're around the same.
And I'm okay with Jordan Addison actually over Christian Watson. I think there's a world, to go back to the Packers right now, I think there's a world where Christian Watson is just left out of the equation all of a sudden. Like,
or he could be their number one guy and blow everyone out of the water. I think this is where we're at with the Packers receivers.
Yeah, both are in play. Or every single week it's somebody different. As you said right off the top of the Packers, it's like 1 week it's Watson, 1 week it's Wicks, and on from there. I have Addison right into like the 30s. I think he's kind of, like Chris Godwin last year. Like, I could kind of see that as a similar situation, like, especially with the touchdowns being low is a possibility. So I think his ceiling is capped, which is why I don't have a lot of Jordan Addison on my teams. I still like Jordan Addison, the player. I still like what he can bring as a wide receiver 3, but I think with the quarterback situation, with this team, with Justin Jefferson, as you mentioned, being able to still command so much, even no matter who the quarterback is, I don't know how much is left over. And then you still have the impending return of TJ Hawkinson. Like, Jordan Addison might actually be, if you get him at a good value ADP for inexperienced leagues, enjoy the first 2 or 3 weeks and don't wait till like the game before Hawkinson comes back. But after like 3 good games, then flip him before Hawkinson makes his return.
When do we think that Hawkinson's coming back?
I still think it's midseason.
So let's say week 9-ish. Do you draft him?
Which, that's a good question
do you draft him, or do you become the guy that's like week 4, week 5, you're looking at it and being like, all right, I'm going to stash him now? Like, do you think he is a player that gets drafted and stashed? And do you think that he's worth being a player that's drafted and then stashed?
So this 100%, I gave the question to Meany first. I am on, so there's only 2 scenarios. You have IR spots. You can't do it without IR spots, then I wouldn't draft them. IR spots, because now you essentially kind of get a free gamble draft pick after you put them in your IR, and then you take somebody off waivers, and congratulations, you got another lottery ticket. Or best ball. And I was bringing that up because I'm in a charity best ball, and I took him in the 9th round because I'm like, yeah, you know what? 9th round, looking at the other names on the board, I'll just take the gamble that he comes back after 5 or 6 weeks, and then I have that, and then I'll grab another tight end later. IR spot would actually probably take him 10th, 11th round, and then stash him right away because it's the upside once he's back. Could it be a wasted pick? Sure, but how many times do you have a 10th, 11th round pick that ends up being wasted anyway?
I completely agree. He's being drafted as 13th at tight end in season long, pick 110 overall. Like, if you have that extra spot, or like I play in a league where we have an extra bench spot specifically for this, we don't have IR, or you can draft like a rookie and redshirt them and keep them the next year if that's what you want to do. I think it's a worthy gamble just based on the usage that we saw from him last year. The problem would be for me is that when he comes back, is he still TJ Hawkinson? That does it take him a few weeks to like ramp up to get back to full speed, and then you're sitting there in like week 15 being like, all right, this guy fucking sucks.
Which is possible, but it's tight end. I mean, you're shooting for the fact that Hawkinson is Hawkinson when he comes back, and that the quarterback, whoever it might be at that time, realizes that Hawkinson is Hawkinson and gives him that kind of workload. There's a case where he comes back and he's 95%, and he's 3rd behind Addison now when he comes back, just because of the chemistry, and they don't want to, the quarterback, whoever it might be, as I said that again, just doesn't look to him as much, and then maybe we're talking about 2025 as a great rebound candidate. There's that risk, but I'm willing to take that gamble on a potential top 3 tight end in the 10th, 11th round.
And that will do it on the Pat Mayo Experience NFC North Division Preview. You can check out all the previous division previews. I think this is number 5. We got more coming.
Wait, you don't want to yell at me about McCarthy being the quarterback?
I mean, I don't care either way. Like, if it's Darnold, if it's McCarthy, that doesn't really change anything for me. It's just they're going to throw at Justin Jefferson. That's good.
You were just so, like, I said Sam Darnold, you're like, no, McCarthy's going to... I thought there was a big argument coming.
There's not a big argument. I think that McCarthy is going to be the starter. If he's not the starter, I don't think it hurts anyone fantasy-wise.
Okay. Do you think week 1?
Yeah, I do think it's going to be week 1. If it's not week 1, like, when's their bye? I guess that's probably the better question. Minnesota bye week.
I went down this road before.
Their bye week is week 6. Okay, so we might see him week 7. at home against Detroit, but I could just see him starting against the Giants. Like, let's go. Like, if you're the guy,
So
you're the guy.
that was-
Do it.
My argument was, I know that people thought that, like Drake May, he was like raw, but like if you're taking a quarterback there, why wouldn't you do everything possible to just get him out there week 1 and make it? You're talking about Sam Darnold and Jacoby Brissett. We're not talking about like really good quarterbacks. I'm with you, but you also talk about after the Giants, San Francisco, Houston, at Green Bay, Jets. Maybe they do just wait for the bye week, but I think JJ McCarthy definitively starts this year.
Yeah. Okay. And I don't think either one of them. In fact,
Right.
Sam Darnold might be better for Justin Jefferson because he's going to take 3 steps back and throw loop-de-loops up to him. Hey, go get it, man. And Jefferson's good
That
enough
is
to
fair.
go do that.
Yeah, you're not wrong there.
Yeah, like Darnold's like worse, the worst version of that Jameis 30-30 year. Like, look how good, remember
bad
how good
Jameis.
DJ Moore was in Carolina with Sam Darnold?
Yeah, you're not wrong.
Just like, hey, that guy's good,
agreeing
I'll
with
throw
you.
to him or the other team. It doesn't matter to me.
Sam Darnold stinks. Let's just be honest.
That was great, though. Just great comedy with Sam Darnold.
Until he starts stealing freaking rushing touchdowns.
Yeah, that's
The hell was that all
always no
about?
fun. Sammy scrambles. He gets his like little steps in. You're like, that guy can't run. Look at him. Oh, God, he's going. Pretty decent runner. Anyway, all our division previews are up already. I'll link them down in the description if you want to go check those out. RunTheSims.com, completely free to use for those customizable projections. And you saw how quickly I can amend those, and you can too with a membership there if you want to get the subscription, code Mayo. But if you don't, you can just use them for free with an email address and code Mayo at Underdog Fantasy right now. Get that deposit bonus of up to $250. Smash the like on the way out. Sub to the podcast if you enjoy audio versions of all this stuff. All right, I'm Pat Mayo. I'll see you next time.
Mayo experience. Experience.